Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root, from CardsWire.com, the Arizona Cardinals site from the USA Today NFL Wire, with my co-host, Seth Cox, from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, the Arizona Cardinals site from SB Nation, and also one of the hosts of the original Draft Breakdown podcast. And we bring you episode 319 as we are looking ahead to the Cardinals' first preseason game, which they will kick off at State Farm Stadium Friday night against the Dallas Cowboys, who are the focal point of this year's Hard Knocks. We won't get to see Dak Prescott. We might get to see a little bit of the starters, probably not Ezekiel Elliott, but it'll be somewhat of a preview of the team that we will see in week 17 in Big D down at the end of the year. But in this episode of the show, well, first off, Seth, how are things with you and the podcast and the site and everything else in general?
It's going well, man. I mean, it's been, as you know, quite busy Cardinals stuff, which is always fun. But the reality is, it's getting to the point where you can only talk so much about hypotheticals, and we now are, looking forward to finally getting a little real football action, and figuring out what this Arizona Cardinals team has and what they are. That's going to, I think, unfold in over the next couple weeks. But I mean, at the same time, I think you and I both know that there's not going to be a ton that we get out of this first game with all of the missing pieces. But hey, at least it's football, and at least it's Arizona Cardinals football, and we're going to get to see a little bit of Kyler Murray, allegedly, and get back to enjoying the Arizona Cardinals and hopefully get the bitter taste of last season out of our mouth.
and let us. What we're going to cover this. Show. We're going to talk about apparently the number of injuries that we've got, but more than anything, we're going to talk about what we want to look for in the preseason game, who we're going to be watching, and then of course the Cardinals release their first depth chart. We'll react to that, what we think about everything. But let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about the injuries, because it seems like now the most glaring thing right now is the fact that they had to sign 4 veteran defensive linemen, and that was just quiet. And so now they've got 12 players on the offseason roster on the defensive line. They have 1 on injured reserve, and they have J.J. Watt on PUP. So, yeah. So far what we know, Cliff Kingsbury continues to be non-disclosing of any and all types of injuries and timelines, because he doesn't have to, and I get it. I don't like it, because it just makes my job more difficult. But it would appear, well, obviously, Xavier Williams was placed on IR. J.J. Watt's on PUP. At last Saturday's practice was the one I attended most recently. Zach Allen did not practice. Rashard Lawrence did not practice. Corey Peters did not practice. He's not injured, though. He was just getting acclimated. And So they were down all of those, and Jordan Phillips, of course, didn't practice either, who's been out for most of camp, it believes. So they are down a number of players on the defensive line, which I know it's training camp, but coming off of last season in which they had 6 guys on IR and Jordan Phillips got on IR twice, it's a real area of, it's a red flag to me to be, let's, unless we're just going to get them out of the way now and we're going to be fine during the season, that is an area I worry about.
Yeah, and I think it is a concern because it's been, again, we talked about it a little bit last week, is that there's just not a ton of camaraderie along the defensive side of the ball yet. And then you kind of factor in all of those guys that are just not getting any work together and are unable to stay healthy. And yeah, I mean, I think it makes it difficult for the Cardinals to develop chemistry and talent. And then you add in the fact that it is important players. It's not, and I don't want this to sound bad when I say it, but it's not Michael Dogby. It's not, I know they cut him, but it wasn't Xavier Williams. It's core key guys. JJ Watt is what it is. Like, I don't think we were super concerned about it at the time, but now with Jordan Phillips and that situation, bringing back Corey Peters, and you and I love the signing, don't get us wrong, but it does start to concern you that they are maybe mildly concerned about the status of some of these guys, maybe for even like the opening of the season, right?
Yeah, that's the part that I worry a little bit about is, well, if it's like that, and they have to carry extra defensive linemen on the roster while they're getting guys healthy, that's going to mess with the roster build for the final 53, because you can't put them on IR now. They have to wait till they make the final 53 to do that. Now, the Corey Peters signing, it's great to have Corey back. The thing is that it was a surprise to sort of everyone because it happened super fast, and it was fast for Corey too. When he came to work out, he didn't work out planning on signing a contract. In the words of what his agent told me, he said it happened fast, and that tells me that they felt a little bit, and including him plus the addition of 4 other veteran defensive tackles, tell me that they were borderline desperate. Now, I initially just thought, okay, they knew that Xavier Williams was hurt, so they needed to get their veteran nose tackle back on the roster, because that's kind of what I felt. We both felt that was, in terms of targets, that they were going to do. They were going to add a veteran nose tackle so that they'd had some experience behind Rashard Lawrence / Leki Fotu. But it's not just the fact that they signed him, but then they added 3 others, Jack Crawford, Margus Hunt, and then Darius Kilgo. Those guys are, those are established as like the addition of Clinton McDonald in other years and things like that. So I don't know exactly what to think about all of this, but it sounds like, here's the thing. Jordan Phillips for me is the one guy that I'm kind of worried about because he had the hamstring issue last year twice that put him on IR. And I'm hoping it's not still the hamstring, because that would be a bad premonition to what's going to happen this season, kind of like Max Williams and his ankle last year.
Well, and just like we talked about a little bit last week, it's really, really difficult for him to play with any type of hamstring or leg impingement at all, because the way he does play is not like a normal 6'7", 350-pound lineman. He's not just a run-stopping behemoth. He's a upfield penetrating guy. He's a one-gap attacking guy. So it's not going to, allow him to do anything if he's got any sort of twinge in the lower legs. I wrote about it a little bit today. I think the addition of Marcus Hunt is interesting because he's played on some good defenses the last 3 years as a bit player. He was on two talented Colts defenses. He played there 3 years. The first year they were not good, but the second year they were top 10 and then won a playoff game, and then the third year was the year they lost Andrew Luck to retirement, and that's going to hurt any defense. And they still were just below bottom half. They were 18th at 23 points per game. I mean, that's not terrible.
No, for me, you look at the additions. I forgot to mention Josh Morrow, Marcus Hunt. Those guys fit in the type of role that they have for J.J. Watt and Zach Allen, which then raises questions. You're like, wait a minute, are those guys okay? But yeah, those are the same type. J.J. Watt is at another level, okay?
Right.
Zach Allen is they believe that has a J.J. Watt feel to his game. He's just he's below that. And then Josh Morrow is a cheaper version of Zach Allen.
Right, and so that's the thing. So, when you look at the injury concerns, it is a concern. I mean, there's no doubt that there's a concern about the injuries on this roster, and we'll start from day one when we talked about it after our post free agency show, is that they Steve Keim and Cliff Kingsbury were basically staking their careers on veteran talent staying healthy. And the ironic thing, in the whole situation is the only, veteran that they got that's been healthy is, the last several years has been Rodney Hudson. And so when you look at it at that, the only guy right now healthy is Rodney Hudson.
And he missed a few games.
Yeah, I mean, at least that was COVID related, and it was a little slightly different. I mean, that's something out of their control for the most part.
AJ Green is the other one that you're like, I hope it's nothing, but what if it's that foot again?
Yeah, and so that's where you're exactly. That's where you're concerned, and that's where you hope that it's nothing, and you kind of go from there. And I honestly, I don't know what to think at this point. We're obviously we're recording on a Wednesday. This will get put out tomorrow night, Thursday night, and give you about 24 hours to listen to it before the first preseason game. And I think you and I both would agree with the idea that this preseason game means absolutely nothing. It doesn't matter. But at the same time, we'd love to be able to see AJ Green run 3 routes, right?
Yes.
We'd love to see Rondell Moore, catch one football.
Though Rondell was back at practice on Wednesday, so that is promising, and so hopefully that means he will get at least a few reps. He did get overworked, and that was kind of the issue with some of the other players going down, as he got overused, which training camp it can happen. So hopefully he will get some reps. AJ probably will not. DeAndre probably will not.
And I'm fine with Hopkins not playing. I would be fine with Kyler Murray not playing, if we're being honest. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but
I believe in playing the starters some.
If Hopkins and Green, if more guys were available, I would agree. But for me, like, they just need rhythm and timing, and you're obviously not going to get that if all those guys aren't out there now.
True, but at the same time, I like it for the evaluation purposes, for the not the top 2 receivers, but you get the depth receivers work with the number 1 quarterback.
Well, and we haven't even talked about it yet, but Andy Isabella is back on the COVID-19 list.
It's bad news for Andy, actually.
And that's another one, because without AJ Green in there, you get Andy Isabella as the, quote unquote starter, just based on the initial depth chart that we'll discuss in a little bit. But and now he's missing, so that's going to go to. I mean, is Keyshawn going to slide over? Is it going to be the kid that's number 3 on that depth chart right now? That would have been a big game for Andy to get to play in. We talk about preseason and it not mattering, but for guys like Andy Isabella and Keyshawn Johnson, it's going to matter quite a bit because they're going to, determine whether or not one of them makes the roster or maybe both. But you and I are already speculating 3 quarterbacks, so that means a number's got to get cut from somewhere.
It's true. Coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's talk about this preseason game coming up. Who do we want to watch? What do we want to see? That's coming next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, and we look ahead to the preseason game Friday night, State Farm Stadium. It's gonna be a long night, but we're going to see some starters. We're going to see a lot of the young players. But if we're going down a list right now, if we're just talking individual players, who are the players you want to see most?
The first guy that I want to see, I mean, there's so many of them, but I think the first 2 I want to see is I want to see the inside linebackers. I mean, Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons, both. People are going to disagree with me, and it is what it is. I'm going to count this as basically Simmons' rookie year as well. I know he's got some playing time.
It's like in Major League Baseball, he didn't get enough service time in his first year to count as a year. So this in Major League Baseball, that's how that works. So this year he would actually be a rookie because he didn't get enough service time last year to call him a rookie, to lose that rookie distinction.
Correct, and that's where I'm at, and so when you look at it, those are the first things. There's so little you can evaluate. No Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott's probably not playing. I don't even know what offensive linemen that these guys are going to roll out this week. It doesn't matter. I just want to see those guys showing initially some type of rhythm, and that to me will be the obviously most important thing for them, right? Out of the gate, and so those are the first 2 guys I'm really excited to see.
Yeah, that makes total sense. These are 2 players that the Cardinals, it happens to be the 2 players in the middle of the field, both young, that they didn't kind of back themselves up with veteran. Now, if they end up keeping Jordan Hicks, okay, then they're all right. Then that makes sense. That said, I'm really intrigued to see what they do with that. I want to see Chris. There's 2 players on offense. One is I want to see Chris Streveler play, because the one playing time that we got him see was against the number 1 defense in a critical game, and things didn't go that well. And while it seems very clear, at least this offseason, this training camp, Colt McCoy is the number 2. That's how the reps are going, and he's looked better than Streveler. But I want to see him because Cliff Kingsbury is still bullish about Streveler as a player, and I'm intrigued to know whether or not they're going to keep 3 on the roster. I think it's going to be hard to do it, but I still want to see Streveler play. And obviously, I'm with the scores of Cardinals fans who want to see Eno Benjamin in action, and especially if we can catch him doing some good things on special teams, because I think I think when it comes to the running game, I think he will wow you in the preseason game. That'll be fun to see. But yeah, those are my top 2 players I'm watching. Other than Kyler Murray, yeah, but Chris Streveler, Eno Benjamin, and then I want to see Rondale Moore. I want to see him do something because I think he'll give some excitement. I doubt Chandler Jones plays, especially with the contract situation. Devon Kennard, I want to see a little of him. And then Josh Jones at right guard. That's the other one there. I want to see what he's doing at right guard because there's no Justin Murray, there's no Brian Winters, so we get to see the young guy, and who's super confident. Playing guard is still a little new to him, but those are the guys I'm kind of looking at. There's a whole bunch of things I want to watch, but those are my main ones initially.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned I think that's a great pick. I'm interested to see what Darqueze Dennard has left in the tank. I'm hopeful that Robert Alford doesn't even come on the field. I honestly don't know what the plan is for him, but I would be okay if he doesn't play at all. So, for my guys, a lot of my guys, I think Jones was a good one to highlight because, again, we'll get into the depth chart, but, it was interesting to see where he was on the depth chart and then where he's playing. And then that gives you some pause on, and we know that this depth chart doesn't mean anything in general, but it's just interesting to see how it's coming out now and then where they're playing on Friday. Because it's like, wait a second, those guys aren't even on the field. And wait, this guy's playing here. So, is Jones going to start at right guard and then slide over to right tackle and with the twos? Or is he too important and they're just going to, after the ones come out, he's one of the ones that come out? Those are, as much as we want to see the effectiveness of the play, those are also the questions I have, or how these guys are going to be rotated and what the usage looks like. And I know it's a game that, again, means little to nothing, but I just want to see what the plan is for some of these guys that, we are expecting something from.
Also, what do they do in the return game? We'll talk about the depth chart, but the guys they have listed on the depth chart for guy I don't expect to be returners this year. And so, but yeah. Jalen Thompson, we barely saw what it is. It'd be nice to see him make a play or two in the limited work he's going to get. But like the safeties in general, that room is stacked. They've got, when they released Donald Rutledge, it's funny because they've listed Donald Rutledge as a linebacker on their roster, but he's only practiced with safeties, and he was at a safety on the depth chart. They now have 7 safeties on the roster, all of whom I believe could make the team, including their 7th round pick, James Wiggins. And so all 7 of those safeties, I think, are very capable of making the team, especially since, you've got your Jalen Thompson and Budda Baker. Those are your established starters. Chris Banjo was respectable when he played. Sean Williams has been a starter in the league.
And Banjo is such a key.
Right. And so you've got Banjo. You've got Washington, who are core special teamers. Williams, who I assume they signed to be a core special teamer. And then Wiggins, who is an athletic freak, who should be doing things on special teams as well. So that I have no idea what's going to happen. So just to see this, the dynamics at safety are going to be fascinating.
If Wiggins is healthy, I would assume that he's gonna make the roster as a special teams guy, unless he just somehow is awful.
Well, that's I think he would, but the guys ahead of him, they're good on special teams too. That's the weird stuff. Oh, Marco Wilson. Oh, I hope the rookie cornerbacks. Marco Wilson, Tay Gowan. Gowan has been. We'll talk about that later, but Gowan hasn't gotten a lot of burns so far in training camp. But Marco Wilson, with the injuries that have popped up, has gotten some first team reps. Let's get him some looks. That as well. And honestly, I won't lie. I kind of want to see what everyone looks like. And when it comes to the offensive line, I'm really bad at noticing that during the game. So that's one of the things you have to go back and watch again afterwards. Watch the game again, where you can look at that, because I spend my time looking at,
everybody else,
like the skill players, the edge, the pressure, and pre-snap. I'm looking at formations because I chart personnel and their formations to kind of look at what they're doing. So yeah, I mean,
and it is going to. I mean, this is a little off topic, but it's going to be even harder this year because um, they're allegedly taking away the all 22 film from NFL.com. So
yeah, well, yeah, the Game Pass is out. I think it's coming. That's separate. I think it's coming back, but I think what it is they're going to find a way to make it harder to screen capture.
oh, okay. Yeah, all these dirty hipsters and their Twitter.
Right, or the Doug Farrars on Touchdown Wire, or like the film analysis that so many people do on their websites. Which, guys, come on, I don't know why the NFL does, like, unless they're I don't know.
You know how the NFL is. They love their product more than anybody else. So. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned the young corners, and the reason that I didn't really mention them is because it's just I guess I'm more interested to see where, kind of like what you said, where they're going to get that burn at, because they haven't. Wilson's been involved quite a bit, like you said, but outside of that, what are they? When are they coming in? Is Tay a guy that they're going to try to hide for the practice squad? Is are they going to keep the 4 veterans? If knock on wood, everybody says healthy, and in Alford, Butler, and Denard to go along with obviously Murphy. Like, are they, like, those are the questions I have more than anything right now, because the roster is just it's such a mishmash right now of unknowns that when you get past the first 22 or 23 guys, it becomes a real puzzle. And I'm interested to see how they, one, fight that out, but two, how they put that puzzle together.
Absolutely. Anything else of note? There is one other player, and this is just a hunch, and it's going to be hard for him to make the roster, I think. Michael Dogby is a guy I've been super intrigued with since he was drafted. He just missed, he made the roster, then didn't make the roster, and bounced between the active roster and the practice squad.
And I think that's going to happen again.
Felt like this offseason, watching him in off-season work and now in training camp a little bit, that there's a little something there. Like, they like him, they really like him, but it might be a numbers game there. So I want to see him make plays, because he's a guy that's really easy to root for, especially if you remember that draft day call, the tears, and just and the fact that there is a certain mentality that comes from Temple players that you have a hard time not rooting for.
Right, exactly. And it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds with the defensive line, because as we said, it looks like they would like to just keep 6. And if you look at obviously they just re-signed Corey Peters, and the JJ Watt's going to be there, and it's virtually impossible to cut Jordan Phillips at this point.
Nope.
So you figure he's going to be there. So that's 3. So there's 3 spots left for a lot of guys that deserve.
Well, right. Here's locks. Watt's a lock. Lawrence is a lock. Phillips is a lock. Flecky's a lock. Zach Allen's a lock. Corey Peters is a lock. And that's 6 guys.
Yeah, and that makes it tough. But I think Dogby fits really nicely into the practice squad ideal for what they want to do, because he's a guy, like you said, that they've yo-yoed before, and they trust him, if they need him in a pinch.
Coming up next on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move on and talk about the depth chart that came out. How much of it is real? What were we surprised about? We'll talk more about that. That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. We're going to talk about the offensive side of the ball first. We'll take a look at the offensive side of the ball, and the starters really were no surprise. Actually, one surprise based on what I've seen. So, Your starting quarterback is no big deal. Chase Edmonds is listed ahead of James Conner. The three starting receivers are Kirk, Hopkins, and Green. You've got Max Williams at tight end. But on the offensive line, it's still Justin Murray listed as the starter. Even though, wink, wink, I shouldn't say this necessarily, but what you saw before Brian Winters got hurt, Brian Winters was running with the first team and basically has been in every open drill that I've seen, that he was listed ahead of Murray, but been working ahead of Murray. That said, I think, as I noted when I wrote about it, that this happens to be incumbent, heavy. That when they have newcomers, with the exception of a couple, that the guy who held the job before, and Murray was the starter at the end of last year, they are leaving them there. And as these depth charts goes, because notice it's prepared by the media relations department, it's not put together by the coaching staff. We've seen depth charts that, after they've, and I think that the media relations department adjusted after what they've seen on the field. So it's part information that they get from the coaches and part reacting to what they see on the field. That said, Justin Murray is still listed as the starter. When I was there after the red-white practice and they were actually doing the run-through of like the players coming onto the field, the cheerleaders and all of that, how they do that, the announcing had Justin Murray listed as the starting at right guard. Were you surprised at that?
Yeah, I was a little bit. Not sure what to make of it, I guess would be a better way to explain it. But the way they've spoken about Joshua Miles, maybe they have the idea that it's going to be, that they have enough trust in Miles now to allow Murray to take hold of the starting position at right guard, because they feel like what they do with Murray won't impact the whole offensive line, if that makes sense.
Right.
So now they've got, they're comfortable in Miles. They like Josh Jones. And all that means is that, oh, hey, we can start the guy we want at right guard. Maybe that is Justin Murray. Maybe it's just, and this is, just us having a conversation. I don't want anybody to take this to heart, but like maybe this is a, hey, Brian Winters, get back out there type of wake up call. So those are some thoughts I have on the whole situation, because it's different than any, most of the stuff that we've seen and what we've kind of witnessed so far.
Yeah. The interesting is you noted this earlier, how Josh Jones is listed as the backup right tackle. I think that's where his role is going to be, but they wanted to give him reps at right guard and to give him a chance to compete, because the kid wants to play, and I'm sure that Cardinals brass would love to see him play, since he was their third round pick a year ago. However, based on what Sean Kugler said on Saturday, is that right now Jones is only at right guard, and that's because of the injuries to Winters and Murray. So he's not getting any reps at right tackle right now. So I would anticipate he probably doesn't get reps in the preseason game. In fact, this is how I think things end up going, is that Josh Miles will play a ton, that he will be there, because they have Coda Martin listed as their backup, their third string left tackle. You know what I've never seen Coda Martin do in any practice? Play left tackle. I've only seen him at guard the last 2 years.
I was going to say play, but yeah, play left tackle is the more accurate.
And it's interesting because they have Brandon Bowen listed as the third string right guard, but the only place I've seen Bowen play in practice is right tackle. So I imagine that now Ryan Pope, who is on the depth chart as the third string right tackle, no longer on the team. So after the starters leave, and I think that will include Jones, is that the line you're going to see is, Josh Miles, Harlow at left guard, which is where he's practiced Max Garcia. Interesting is how Max Garcia has gone from, fill-in guy, swing guard guy to that he's the backup center. And also interesting because that the releases of Lamont Gilliard ended up being weird, but I think it makes sense now. Max Garcia, at least physical, is the same type of player as Rodney Hudson, and I think that's one of the things they wanted to make sure they did at center was get bigger and more physical, because Mason Cole was a small center. He was listed at 292. He was under that 300 threshold that you always kind of look at for centers. Hudson's 315. Kugler said Max Garcia's 315. He's listed at 309. Both of those are just strong guys. And it's going to work nicely to have Garcia there as the backup center and focusing on the one position. So I think it'll be Miles, Harlow, Garcia, then either they might bring, so it'll be Shaq Calhoun maybe, or Coda Martin at right guard, or maybe they swing Marcus Henry or Michael Minette there at guard first with Bowen playing tackle. And then when they go third string, that Miles and Bowen continue at the tackle positions, and then Minette, Marcus Henry, and Coda Martin will then move into those interior spots, is how I see that going. But now at receiver, it's going to be interesting to watch, because Andy Isabella drafted, they talked about him as a potentially great slot receiver. They gave him work. They tried to make him in the slot receiver. Cliff Kingsbury lamented how they probably didn't do him any favors this rookie year. Last year, he really only played the slot. And then the first practice I attended, Cliff said how Andy has outside-inside flexibility. Then last Saturday, he said how, well, it was during the week because people were talking about it, and even the two of us have sort of assumed that Rondell Moore is a better version of Andy Isabella. And Cliff says they're not necessarily battling for the same spot because Isabella is better on the outside, which just goes to show Moore is what they wanted Isabella to be, but he never did. Now he won't be able to play, but he's listed as the backup Z to AJ Green. And Keyshawn Johnson is the primary backup to DeAndre Hopkins. I wonder who will be the outside guy after the starters come out, because I anticipate that we will see Keyshawn, Kirk, and maybe I bet it's Bachelia who's the Z, fast guy who will be with the starters, and then it'll be interesting to see how they or maybe they line Kirk up on the outside and let Rondell play in the slot with the starters. That might be what they do.
Yeah, and it could be, it'll be interesting, like you said, how they go about this and figure out what their rotations are. One thing we do know, Chris Traveler is not going to be throwing to, any big talents. So
he'll be mostly he'll be handing the ball off to Jonathan Ward and Eno Benjamin. Interesting thing, Eno has gotten all the attention naturally because he played college here at Arizona State. Jonathan Ward is still ahead of him and has been clearly ahead of him in everything that we've done, but no one talks about Jonathan Ward. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. The thing that's going to be interesting to watch is they signed Ito Smith. Where does he come in? Is he going to end up pushing Eno?
Yeah, and that was going to be my question to you: is what is the Ito Smith signing mean? And does it really matter, or is this the guy that's going to get those third quarter carries, and somebody else is going to get the fourth quarter carries, and that'll be it?
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. Then JoJo Ward is a guy that will be interesting to see because they've got him in the slot. I've seen him play some outside, and then tight end. Oh, I forgot to mention, we get to see Psycho play, Bernhard Psychovitz, the Austrian player. I'm sure he'll be fun to watch. But yeah, Then they've got some small, fast guys in Aliva Hefo and Greg Dortch. And then, if Antoine Wesley is healthy, it'll be fun to see at his length what he can do on the outside. Because, yeah, there's all sorts of things that we're going to look at with that. But yeah, Colt McCoy is going to clear the number 2. He'll get the 2 snaps. You might see him throw the ball more, but I think Chris Strevel's mostly going to be in the game handing the ball off, wouldn't you say? Unless it's, I guess it all depends on what the game is, because if they're down sort of close and they want to go down and try and have those young guys go and win a game, maybe we'll see what he can do with, like Drew Anderson did a couple years ago.
Yeah, and I like Drew Anderson getting those opportunities, and like you said, maybe they'll find a way to involve Streveler in a similar way to get him to get opportunities to really make an impact. I know, again, it's not important in the scheme of things, but I think it's important for these guys to begin to understand and really get a sense of winning consistently.
Yep. Let's take a look at the defense. So coming out next on the Rise of C Red podcast, the best Cardinals talk on the web. Let's wrap it up and talk about the defensive depth chart. That's coming next on Rise of C Red. We're back on the Rise of C Red podcast, the best Cardinals talk on the web. Defensive depth chart. Only one surprise for me, and that's based on what I've seen. We all assumed Malcolm Butler would be the starter this year with Byron Murphy. Yet, OTAs, minicamp, and training camp, Robert Alford has been the corner on the field with Murphy in the base set, and Butler comes in. Butler is listed as a starter alongside Murphy, with Alford behind them, which is kind of interesting because of the kind of like the Justin Murray situation. You figured that Alford would be there and that Butler would eventually overtake him, but not that Butler probably is not going to play, so we're going to see Alford. Anything that stood out to you?
No, it was, just based on our discussions, it was odd that, like you said, that Butler was running as the 1, but I go back to the idea that I think this is going to be a lot of 4-2-5 on defense. And I don't know what that means in terms of 4, and I don't know what that means in terms of 2, and I don't know what that means in terms of 5. And what I mean by that is I don't know if that means the 4 is going to be 4 down linemen or if it's going to be 3 down linemen with Isaiah Simmons flexed up. And then the 2 are Hicks and Collins. And then are the 5 going to be 3 safeties and 2 corners, or is it going to be, a combination of Alford, Butler, and Murphy with Buddha and Jalen? And so that's kind of my question. And I don't think we're going to get any answers right now because it's the preseason, and I don't think we're going to even know what the defense is going to look like really until week 1, hopefully, right? Because we're hoping that everybody comes back healthy and ready to go. But we'll see how it goes. I am excited about it, but the depth chart shows also the couple of weaknesses that we really have seen, and or I shouldn't say have seen, but are concerned about. And I think you and I agree. One of the big concerns is that edge position. Man, it falls off a cliff pretty fast.
It does absolutely. You like now, especially if you've got Watt back in the lineup. Chandler Jones, J.J. Watt, Marcus Golden, Devon Kennard. You like Dennis Gardick when he comes back, but I don't think it's going to be till mid-season. After that, you're like Kylie Fitz, Reggie Walker, Victor Dimukeje. And as much as we might like Victor Dimukeje, he has done exactly zero from what I have seen that's significant in camp.
Yeah, and in reality, when you watch his film, and I talked about it when I wrote about him, he's really kind of a lesser Marcus Golden.
Right. That I know they compare him to Marcus Golden a lot, but Marcus Golden was a second-round pick.
Well, and remember the thing that Golden he has still that 90% of people don't have is he is unrelenting when he plays. He is, I know it's a joke, and I know a lot of people talk about, oh, he's a junkyard dog and all. Like, the dude's motor doesn't stop, and that's not something that you can coach. It's not something that you can add to a player, and that's just who Marcus Golden is. And so to compare anybody to that is unfair, because 99% of players just don't have that ability.
Right? Yeah, he is a special player. That absolutely is. Evan Weaver, buried on that depth chart. He needs to look good in the preseason. He's one of those guys who's kind of been forgotten. Great game tape in college. He's athletic enough, but he's not that athletic. And he even admitted this on a podcast a few months ago. When it comes to, like, in practice, he won't stand out in practice. He stands out in games. So,
and that's always a problem. I mean, it really is a big issue.
So hopefully you get to see him thump some guys in the second half of the game. I think we probably will see a lot of him thumping guys in the second half of games.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else of note? I mean, looking at the depth chart. Oh, the one thing. Go ahead.
I was going to say I'm interested to see what the kicking situation looks like. We've talked about it. Andy Lee basically is uncuttable. So what does that mean for Tyler Newsome, and where what do they do in terms of kickoffs? Because they don't have any other kickers right now, right?
Nope. He can do both. And that's the thing. He is. So Newsome is that camp body, but he happens to have a kind of a really, really good skill set with punting. It means what he's going to do. He's going to punt, and he's going to kick off in the preseason. And, yeah. I think that's pretty much what it's going to mean. And then I think he's a guy they're going to want to keep either – I don't know if they'll keep him on the practice squad. With the 16-player practice squad as it's anticipated to be again this year, they probably keep him around, or he's on their short list if anything happens during the season.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what is key for guys like him.
And, well, with that, I think...
Are you – I was going to ask you one more thing on specials. Are you expecting more to return – anything this weekend?
No, I wouldn't see that at all. I think they're going to. I think the situation is this. I think the Cardinals are confident in what they know about more in the return game, and don't want to. We'll see that. And I think they want to give other guys a look, at least in this game, especially since Moore just came back. So you're going to see guys like Greg Dortch, Alifa Hifo, Eno Benjamin, perhaps.
And a guy like Benjamin, it might, be more important for.
Yeah. Because, it'll give him another role
right.
So he can be up on Sunday.
Right. If he does it well, then he might make the roster, whereas opposed to, if Hifo comes out and Hifo's returned, kicks and punts before, then it might do something for him. I was just curious what your thoughts were, because it seems to be one of the grand unknowns at this point.
Right, especially because you don't know how much you're going to do it. And the weird thing is they still got Kirk and Isabella listed as the returners, as the primary returners with more behind them. And the one thing we've noticed over the last couple of years is that no matter what it says on the depth chart, it's never what it is. Now, Kirk actually did return punts quite a bit. Andy Isabella, I think I wrote about it, he returned like 2 kicks last year.
Right. Exactly.
Now, part of that is the whole kickoff touchdown thing, but yeah, it's kind of in terms of returners, I don't look at the depth chart and think that's anything real.
Right, exactly.
Anything else before we wrap things up?
No, I think that's it. I mean, we're just excited that we might actually get to see a little NFL action on Friday, and it's going to be very muted, and it's going to be very, mundane, but it's still going to be.
We're excited that there's football, but it's going to be boring as heck when we're watching. We're like, why are we watching this? Because we're excited that there's football.
Exactly, and that's all that matters.
And with that will end this edition of the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. We will be back again next week to talk about what we saw in the preseason game. When we record, the Cardinals will have made their first cuts because on Tuesday they will have to cut their roster from 90 to 85. So we'll have something to talk about. They're going to be back, the roster guys, anyway. It's not going to matter, but we'll be back again next week. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening, as always.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up C-Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise Up Red C, be Red C-Red, and of course, Rise Up C-Red.